All right, well, welcome all. I am Liz Arrington, and I am the Managing Director of the GCV Institute. And the mission of the GCV Institute is to drive corporate venturing industry advancement, staying power, and impact. And we do this through professional development programs that are informed by our Keystone operational benchmarking platform, as well as we convene communities of practice around key CVC roles. And today's webinar will look at considerations and best practices for CVCs investing in external funds and for looking at how they make the most of these strategic LP positions. I will note that this webinar is a special Asia Pacific time zone edition as we get ready for the GCV Asia Congress and our delegation that will be taking place in Tokyo and Seoul around November 6th through 10th. But for our friends in Europe who don't want to stay up this late, you can register for the webinar and we will send you the replay and a summary article direct to your inbox. And today we are privileged to have with us a brilliant panel, which includes 4 individuals who have thought deeply about strategic fund investment opportunities and challenges. We have 2 CVCs. We have George Kellerman of Toyota's Woven Capital, and we have Chihiro Hosoya of Astellas Pharma, both of whom are active investors in external funds. And we have a multi-corporate fund represented by Blue Venture Fund's John Banta, who invests on behalf of a whopping 36 Blue Cross Blue Shield Health Plan LPs. And we have a VC represented by Katie McLean of Energized Capital, which works closely with strategic LPs in the sustainability space. But before jumping into the panel discussion, as context, I'd like to walk through a little bit of our Keystone CVC benchmarking research, looking at CVCs taking strategic LP positions. You know, historically, LP positions have been seen as a passive investment vehicle for corporations that either lack direct investing skills or who didn't seek to build out a dedicated investment program or team. But that's no longer the case. You know, our 2023 Keystone data shows that the majority of CVCs, 56%, actually do invest in funds. But it's not just the newbies. You know, our data suggests that the percentage of CVCs who take LP positions actually increases with program maturity and fund size. For example, if you look at programs that are set up in their first 3 years, we see 52% take LP positions, but that number rises to 61% for funds that are greater than 7 years old. And the bigger the CVC program, the more likely it is to allocate some portion of investment capital to fund investments. Our data shows that for programs with more than 500 million in assets under management, 70% actually take LP positions. And for programs with over $1 billion in assets, that number rises to 80%. And some of these CVCs actually operate with more like a fund-to-fund strategy. You know, for those that have over $1 billion in assets under management, we see 45% have more than 6 LP positions, and 27% actually have more than 10. And for the 56% of CVCs that do take LP positions, 78% hold more than 1 stake. And while some actually do use LP positions as a toe in the water for learning how to make investments or for deal flow expansion, our data shows that many are actually using these LP stakes in more sophisticated ways to extend the reach of the CVC team and to expand into new geographies, to perhaps draw insights from early stage startups via seed funds, or maybe to access specialist sector expertise like AI and deep tech. And of course, the expectation is with an institutional that they'll generate good financial returns, or at least some financial returns. Interestingly, we see the greatest use of LP positions among corporates in 5 sectors. Among the transportation CVCs and energy CVCs, close to 70% in our data set take LP positions. And for consumer CVCs and financial service CVCs, we see more than 60% taking LP positions. And then, of course, healthcare and life sciences have a long history of investment in specialist funds. Capturing the value from these funds can be challenging. And some VCs are better than others about sharing their expertise, about connecting their strategic LPs with portfolio companies and pipeline, and about tapping corporate domain expertise and resources. But effectively managing those relationships needs to be programmatic on the CVC side. And our research shows a range of approaches from just relying passively on standard LP reporting and communications to deeper engagement through private pipeline and portfolio reviews, through formal portfolio collaboration programs, and in some cases, even secondment of corporate personnel to fund offices or even to portfolio companies. And our recently launched Keystone Benchmarking Survey will explore some of these topics in more detail. So we hope that you all will participate. But in the meantime, let's hear from our 4 panelists who are really living and working in the strategic fund investment trenches. And before diving deep into the conversation, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and their programs, and to encourage all of our audience to submit any questions that you might have via the Q&A function. So why don't we start with, let's start with John Banta. And if you want to tell us a little bit about your personal role, your program, the scale and scope of your program, and in your case, how many corporate LPs do you actually have?
Liz, thank you, and greetings to my fellow panelists and to everybody who's joining the call today. It's a pleasure to be here. So, as mentioned, I run Blue Cross Blue Shield Venture Partners, or Blue Venture Fund, as we've come to call it, which is the venture capital and private equity entity that operates on behalf of the Blue Cross Blue Shield system nationally, and to a more limited degree internationally. Merits a little bit of context for this group. So, as most people on this call, I suspect, are aware, the U.S. healthcare system's rather complex, and there are innumerable public and private payers, and there's equally countless private and some public providers in the ecosystem. And often, Blue Cross Blue Shield is thought to be one company. It's actually 34 different companies, along with a bunch of other sort of affiliates and wholly owned subs, which are all federated together through the common license of the Blue Cross and the Blue Shield brands. All that's really important to remember amongst all of that brouhaha is that collectively we represent one of the largest payers, probably second only to CMS, the federal government payer for Medicare and Medicaid. Collectively, we provide coverage to about 118 million members in the US, which is about a third of the population. And then globally through partners like Bupa in London and Medavie and Can Assurance and some others in Canada, to travelers and expats and students around the world. We're about $1.5 billion under management, about a 15-year-old program. And we have LP investments from about 36 of all 34 of the primary licensees, save one, and then a number of the special purpose licensees. So 36 all told. So nearly the entire system, and we're operating out of a fresh Fund 5 right now, which is around 400 million. In the context of today's dialogue, in some respects, I'm sort of speaking on behalf of my LPs, because although we don't make LP investments ourselves, because we have this unusual structure of having 36 different limited partners, they all have active innovation and corporate development, and in many, probably more than half of the cases, direct investment programs. And so LP investment, such as the one they've made in us, is a very important part of what they do. So it's more than just a toe in the water. It's kind of a key aspect of how they expand and support their innovation and corporate development efforts. And looking forward to talking more about that during the call today.
Great, thank you. So Chihiro, do you want to, let's say on the healthcare theme, you want to tell us a little bit about your program?
Sure. Nice to meet you, everyone. Chihiro Hosoya. I lead business development and venture management of Astellas Pharma in our X Plus division. To provide context, Astellas Pharma is a pharmaceutical company headquartered in Japan, operating globally. Our top line is approximately $10 billion, and we are 100 years old. Those revenue and business are dedicated to pharmaceutical business so far. But this Plus division that I belong to specifically target non-core, non-pharmaceutical business, which is adjacent to the business. Even though in the healthcare, digital and device technology is something that we would like to pursue with this Plus division as a new medical solution business to patient. With that, we rely on VC partners who are actively working with the entrepreneurs in digital and device field to learn about how external entrepreneurs are making business, so that we can reflect the learning how we should create and choose the new business in the field that we don't know. This effort of venture capital investment in this digital and device sector started in 2016, and we liked it a lot, how to learn how much we can learn and obtain the insight from the relationship. With that, we've been expanding the relationship to other VC as well in digital and device field, and we now have 5 active GP working together in this field to kind of collective wisdom for us to be able to launch the new business and rapidly expand the business in this field.
Great, great. So George, how about you? I think you also have multiple LP positions. Tell us a little bit about Toyota's Woven Capital.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having us here today. This is an area that's quite important to us, and it's actually been a foundational element of Woven Capital from day one. My name is George Kellerman. I'm the founding managing director of Woven Capital. As Liz mentioned, we are backed by Toyota, 100% backed by Toyota. We're an $800 million growth stage fund, and we're investing on behalf of Toyota globally. We're just coming up on about 2.5 years old now, but from day one, I allocated roughly 10% of the fund for fund-to-fund investments. And to date, we've made 9 fund-to-fund investments, all in early stage funds, to really give us geographic coverage and sector expertise to really accelerate our own investment activities. We're investing across Toyota. There's a lot of areas that aren't specifically related to mobility or the things that people think of with respect to auto manufacturer, and we've invested in funds that are specialists in areas. One example is a cybersecurity fund. We also invested in a supply chain and logistics fund. So things that are ancillary or important to the future of Toyota are the kinds of things that we looked at when we were making our decisions on who to invest in.
Great, great. Okay, and Katie, do you want to spend a little bit of time introducing Energize Capital and as a VC in this conversation?
Yeah, thank you for having me to represent the VC perspective. As Liz mentioned, I'm Katie McLean with Energize Capital, and we have been investing in climate software companies since 2016. We have over $1 billion in assets under management, and we have 2 different strategies that we manage. We have a venture capital platform and also a growth equity platform. Our focus is on companies that have a software solution to scale industries like the renewable energy industry, the electrification of mobility, industrial digitization, and carbon markets. We are investing out of our second fund right now, and we've always had a strong corporate LP base. We have about 20% of our capital coming from corporates, which is about 12 different corporate LPs. Some have their own VC programs, some do not. And we have a diverse base of corporate LPs covering all the different industries that I mentioned that we cover, which is super helpful for us in our investment process. We work closely with our corporate LPs and consider the knowledge that we get from them to be part of our differentiation in the market. It's really important for us at Energize to have a customer lens in our investment process and to really understand what the customer needs, what the customer is looking for, and what problems need to be solved. When we invest, it's not just about finding the next cool technology, it's about what problem is that technology solving and what value is it bringing to the customer. And the best way for us to get that insight information is actually go out and talk to the customers themselves. So our corporate LPs play a huge role in helping us both with our investment thesis, in diligence, and then also often become customers of our portfolio companies.
Great, great, thank you. Start with George and Chihiro and talk a little bit about why your programs elected to invest in funds either in lieu of or alongside your own direct investment strategies.
I can take the lead on that. As I mentioned, fund-to-fund investments were part of the foundation of Woven Capital from day one. It was actually part of what we proposed to the Toyota Motor Corporation Board of Directors when we set up the fund. And part of the reason, in hindsight, it made perfect sense, but we would still do this today, even if we were launching the fund today. We launched the fund during COVID, and it was extremely difficult to hire people and get them to relocate to Japan. In fact, Japan's borders were closed. And so just as an accelerator, so from day one, we knew that we'd be able to have people on the ground in countries and in regions that could feed information back to us. Our team was only 4 people for the first year and a half. And so we never would have been able to cover the number of startups that we would have liked to by ourselves. And so it really became a force multiplier for us. And it's actually paid greater dividends through some of the special activities that some of the funds do. They have their own annual events that they invite us to, and that we can then network with their portfolio companies and other thought leaders as well. So it's actually, my desire to do it has even been reinforced by the actual results that we've had from doing those investments.
And so, Chihiro, on your side, you have elected not to make direct investments at this point,
Yes,
and primarily work with funds. So what was the thinking behind that strategy?
Yeah, thank you, Liz. Astellas is a pharmaceutical company, and we do have a CVC direct investment vehicle to invest in biopharma, and they also do invest in LP as well. But my division focuses on like non-core, non-pharmaceutical division, which means we don't have expertise to select the right investment and support the portfolio company. So even though we want to do that, we tried some, but it's not appropriate for us to invest in and support the company. Rather, we wanted to work together with the VC funds who already has domain expertise in that field of specialized like digital and device, and digital health and medical device are the field that like there are active working VCs are already there. Rather, we wanted to seek is a direct BD effort arising from the knowledge that we were able to obtain from the VC partner is our immediate goal. Many of the corporation immediate, the ultimate goal is to do the BD activities so that we can actually flourish our own business. And if that's the aim, why don't we focus on like getting knowledge and getting the deal flow and actually getting like what's the best way to accelerate that is that for us was to the VC investment to gain insight and knowledge, and therefore was the thesis that we developed. And the other one is that the timeline and structure of the corporation, unless otherwise we do have an appropriate structure and decision making and dedicated resources to invest and manage the portfolio company, I've learned that it's very difficult to be able to support portfolio company. The startup companies needed money yesterday, but our corporate decision making is like 4 weeks later. Is the chief financial officer meeting. It doesn't really much, and we are in the ecosystem to be able to work better, to be able to make good reputation is our goal. But I recognize until and unless we can do that, it may actually be harmful to just to play around to make direct investment efforts. So with that, we are starting with the VC fund investment so that we can kind of entrust the management and working with VC, but still we can get the knowledge and information that we want through GP as well. We are losing some like a benefit of economics, but the benefit of like indirect knowledge is and the collection of the VC experts actually outweigh the loss of the economics that we are getting here.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about your 37 or 36 LPs, John? What's their rationale for investing in your program as well as doing their own direct investing or investing in other funds?
Sure. So it's evolved a little bit, I think, over time. I mean, like any corporate investor, they are and we are dual aim. We're trying to generate strong financial returns, but we're also trying to generate strategic value. And make no mistake about it, and I think any healthy corporate venture effort is entirely about what Katie was describing. It's having interactions with your LPs or your business unit owners and learning everything you can about what the problems truly are that they're facing, and what is it, not just at a high level, but at a very specific level. How exactly do they define solving for that problem? What's common across your multiple LPs? And our program is designed entirely around that. So we're engaging early on with them to help develop sourcing themes. They're helping us evaluate businesses. It's a bit like crossing a witness on the stand. By the time you bring something to your investment committee, you want to know, you already know the answer. And hopefully we've had enough interaction that we already know it's a likely good vendor. And then it becomes all about how much business they do. So, like I said, we're dual aim. We want to generate strong returns. We have good fortune. Defining strategic value is a hard thing to do. It's usually this sort of fuzzy, ethereal, qualitative notion. We're fortunate to be a multi-corporate because it allows us to think in a very objective way. How much business does the portfolio do with the plans? And right now we're sort of between 2 and 3 billion a year in annual revenue across about 250 commercial relationships, and hopefully at least that. I'm actually certain more than that with the other major nationals, where we're not interested in constraining the portfolio companies at all. We want them to be as successful as possible. But interestingly, when you talk to them about where they get their strategic value, they'll often go beyond that and talk about what you heard Katie and Chihiro and George all alluding to, which is the interactions, that networks that you develop by being involved in these ecosystems is really where the learning is. It's not just developing perspective on strategy and understanding of innovation landscapes. It's the sets of relationships that ultimately have impact on your business in the long term, and how those relationships are evolving. So I would say 10 years ago, there were not very many that had direct investment efforts, and this was a bit of an experiment to be an LP investor of ours. As time went on, more than half of them now have their own direct investment programs, and they've realized this is an extension of the bandwidth for those teams. This is a tremendous resource they can leverage, and it supports their corporate development efforts. So I'd say 30 or 40% of the time we're co-investing with them. It was interesting. One of the questions in the chat had to do with, what do you do if you can't get anybody at the fund to interact? And that's a problem you solve in diligence, right? If it's not a program that's designed around that, it's probably not a good LP investment. You want to be involved with GPs that are entirely about maintaining and supporting those engagements and interactions.
If I could follow on to something John just said, that was actually one of our decision-making criteria, and that was that the fund had to be willing to collaborate and cooperate with us. Because we're backed by a corporate, it tended to be a little easier, I think, than maybe others might find it, but they want their portfolio companies to have access to Toyota. But we definitely wanted to make sure that there was a commitment, and to the extent possible, we put that commitment in a side letter. There's going to be new constraints relating to that with the recent SEC rules, but we actually made that a decision-making criteria.
Yeah, I actually echo George. How much willing the GPs are really important criteria for us to collaborate, and it's actually balanced out how much do we need to put money in order for us to be the primary or the dominant LP among others, and we actually do put in the appropriate or a certain amount of a dedicated collaboration and interaction in the side letter as well.
So if we look at it from the VC perspective, what is the right number of corporate LPs for you to manage, and what do you look for from a corporate LP?
Yeah, I think for us it depends on the size of your team. Our investment team has about 8 or 10 investors now, and our whole team is 20 people deep, and so we have the resources to engage with our corporate LPs. It's very important to us. We want to be engaged. So we like to meet the corporates where they're at. So some of them don't need that kind of engagement, but for the folks that do, we can host monthly calls. We host quarterly calls. We'll go to them on site and meet with the business units, again, to better understand What problems are you trying to solve? What technologies do we know about? What companies do we know about? So when we're looking for potential new corporate LPs, it's who wants to be engaged, who wants to work with us. And like in that same way, we're very research oriented as well. And so we do these research projects we call deep dives. And so we'll call all of our corporate LPs when we're at the beginning stages of that deep dive to ask them, where are your budgets growing? What problems are you trying to solve? So we want that insight and that intel. It's very important to us as investors. So we're looking for that engagement. And then we're looking for folks that know how to navigate the big corporates. They tend to be big companies that have the either VC programs or investments. And so we're looking for that similar engagement on the other side of the fence. And so we want to have someone who knows how to navigate the bureaucracy, how to get to the right business units. Pilots are great. Pilots can often be a road to nowhere. And so making sure that the pilots are worth the startup's time and energy and resources, and really making sure that the corporates, like I said, are engaged and are serious about it as well.
So when I think our research showed, and you kind of echoed, both Chihiro and George, that that you do hold multiple LP stakes, and what is your rationale and your strategy for building a portfolio of LP stakes? And how do you mix and match?
I could take a lead on that, and partly because I want to follow up with something Katie just mentioned. It's not enough that the fund that you're investing in has the capability and the staff to interact with us as the corporate LP. One of the learnings I made from this process over the last few years is we have 9 fund-to-fund investments now. And if I could go back and think about it from the beginning, I would make sure we had a dedicated person just to manage our fund-to-fund investments, because we get so much inbound information from them. Some of them, we do have monthly meetings. Some of them, they're constantly sending us potential deal flow. And just having somebody who can manage that on our side is valuable. And it's actually something we're still considering and thinking of. But in terms of the criteria, we had 3 criteria. I mentioned one earlier with respect to something that John had said in terms of they had to be willing to work with us. The other was geographic diversity. We wanted to make sure that we were covering all the major markets that we were interested in investing in, but we weren't necessarily going to have somebody on the ground in that market. And a really good example is Israel. We're an investor in a fund in Israel, but we didn't anticipate that we would actually have staff on the ground there. So that was a really good way for us to make sure we knew what was going on in that region. The other, and this was really the biggest criteria, is they had to be sector area experts. We only invested in funds that were specialists in a given area that was important to us. And we actually created a matrix. We created a table with geographies across the top, and then the industries that were important to us along the vertical axis. And it was things like mobility, aerial mobility, cybersecurity, AI, different areas that we knew were going to be important. And then we tried to fill out that table as much as possible. And some funds cover more than one industry, but generally speaking, they tended to be sector area experts. And our thinking was they're going to meet 1,000 companies in that sector alone over the course of a year. And they're going to know who the leading companies are and how they're doing well. And the other benefit of that is if we're looking at a company in that particular sector, we could go to them and ask them, hey, what do you think of this company? Have you heard anything about them? And in some cases, we've actually done that. And they said, yeah, we looked at them 2 years ago. We decided to pass, and here's why we decided to pass, but maybe they've overcome whatever challenges they had. So it becomes a really valuable feedback loop as well.
What about you, Chihiro? What were the criteria that you used for?
100% agree with George. We are corporate, and LP funding is very important for us. And we presented this VC falls under this category, and we need to have it because this is something we are lacking. And in addition to the metrics, we did have an implementation plan. Since we do want a close collaboration with each of the VC partners, we will be hiring this type of person and will be managing this VC in this particular manner. It's something we were able to do that. But that's as we learn. We initially started with like a digital health investment back in 2016. That was the kind of tryout digital health fund collaboration. At that time, I was sent from Japan to be an like secondment to that fund to and learn something from there and do something fun. It was like a kind of vague assignment, as you can often see in Japanese corporation, which turned out to be well, actually. And over time, we were able to kind of develop our model. We cannot increase the member of the secondment forever as the number of the funds we invest increases. So we needed to have some like job description which can manage the multiple VC, and so that internal colleagues are also aligned as well. And that's also important to make an alignment internally. It's not always good to like just secondment or the VC or fund management team is responsible at managing, because we are doing this investment from strategic point of view. We really like to make sure that corporate or other members or stakeholders are also understanding and cooperative of that the information that we are getting as well. We have to say we are still halfway, but we are getting better and better as we collaborate with the VC partner as well.
So following in on that, what were your learnings about the secondment programs? Kind of what worked and what didn't work, and what sorts of people were best to second for what time period?
Right. Time period still a good one, but we there is two types of secondment. One is like full-time dedicated 100% at the working at the VC in a short-term period. It's more like educational purpose and growing the personnel, but it doesn't fit in a long term because they are not employed by the VC, and each person gets kind of lost. Who's my boss and how am I evaluated? So as those get into longer term, it's more appropriate to have like a part-time assignment or like shift of the position. Initially, the person was 100% in the VC, but over time, gradually they increase the job of internal program, so that, but still they can have access to those funds managers. Like George was mentioning, how do you think about this? We are working on this. I would love your opinion on that. And those relationships will last long term. So like gradual shift and like flexibly assign the job description depending on the relationship or how busy the VC is running that we think it's working.
Right. And George, do you do secondments to the funds?
No, we don't. But one thing, and this is from a prior experience, I used to be a managing partner at 500 startups, and we had a lot of corporate LPs. And one of the things that we would do in order to get them to commit was letting them second people to us. And we were unique because we weren't just a fund. We actually had an accelerator, and we had 30 companies resident in our office at any given time. And so for them, it was a way to like actually see how startups worked, how they interacted with the community, and then kind of ghost a startup, so to speak, and really interact with them more than it was interacting with us. And so there was definitely part of that in terms of what we did. But we have not, as a fund, seconded anyone to any of our LP investments.
And John and Katie, from a GP perspective, have you accepted secondments from your LPs, and under sort of what circumstances would that make sense from your perspective?
That is not something that we have done yet, and I don't know that we would do that in the future. But always open to creative ideas to work together.
Yeah, we haven't either, and I think the global comment I would make on this topic is general partners that tend to thrive and survive and evolve and do well and persist are optimizing around maximizing this kind of engagement. They are all around intentionally driving this engagement. So it's not really a case of having to have terms and side letters to compel engagement. And when you diligence a fund and go talk to their LPs, go drill down into what their programs are. A really a solid effort is going to be one that's designed to optimize and maximize the engagement with you. We've got a whole toolbox of things we've developed over 14 years, not dissimilar from some of what Katie described. And probably our most effective things were these advisory groups that took these kind of interesting horizontal cuts across the group, all the CMOs in a room, all the CTOs in a room, all the value-based care people in a room, all the managed Medicaid people in a room, just a different cut on things. All that said, it has to be very bespoke and requires a lot of effort and energy and dedicated, thoughtful process, because every LP is a little different, and every LP's cadence of desired contact and the way they want to facilitate business development interactions is a little bit different. And you can easily become tiresome and sort of overwhelm them with efforts to get them to vend with portfolio companies. So you have to be sort of very mindful about what fits, what cadence and what style of interaction fits with each LP. It requires a little bit of dedicated effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So typically, what do all of you see getting included in the side letters and in the formal provisions regarding the collaboration or the mutual value delivery?
So one thing I would comment on, and this is really kind of following up with something John just said. When we first started out, we wanted to get the LP to commit to meet with us monthly, and to share their information, like if they had notes and information on their portfolio companies. What we quickly found, though, is that we were typically on the smaller side of their LPs in terms of the actual financial commitment. And all of their side letters had MFN, most favored nation provisions. And if they offered us a monthly meeting at the check size we were coming in, they'd have to give that to everyone that was investing the same or a larger amount than us. And even though it wasn't something their other LPs had asked for, they weren't prepared to go back and tell them, hey, we'll meet with you monthly now. So part of it was getting comfortable with what they were willing to do. Again, I think we had an advantage in that we are backed by Toyota, and they want to meet with us. They want to bring their startups to us, and so there's some of it's formal. In some of our side letters, it says that they'll meet with us monthly or they'll give us access to their database. But in some cases, it ended up just being a handshake because they couldn't afford to live with giving that same provision to all their other LPs.
Okay, and what were you going to say, John?
I was going to say, we're on a Fund 5 and we've never had a side letter. And I think there's two related topics, right? One is the notion of side letters as a component of an LP investment, and the other is sort of MFNs and ROFRs and what you're doing with commercial terms in your actual investing. And I think there's been sort of a sea change over the last 10 or 12 years. If you go back to, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, the perception of having a strategic in your cap table was very different than what it is now. And there was this lingering notion of, boy, we better not have them until a little bit later, or it might endanger our efforts to diversify our revenue streams. That's kind of flipped on its ear now. People are interested in having strategics involved early. They often have multiple strategics. We co-invest with competitors all the time and have good relationships, as constructive as they can be with folks that we might otherwise compete with. And we avoid MFNs and ROFRs and those sorts of things in our commercial relationships with the portfolio companies as well. And I think that's an important trend, right? You want these companies to be as successful as they can possibly be, and anything that constrains their ability to compete and thrive commercially it's just good old-fashioned CAPM. It's going to reduce their access to funding and clients and ultimately exits, and that makes things challenging. Okay. So I think the two topics are related.
And Katie, do you guys use side letters at all with respect to your strategic LPs for?
Not a ton. I would agree with both what George and John said. For George's point, we create a lot of more handshake deals, and we want to engage with our LPs. So we have not found that we've had to create very onerous side letters to date. The one clause that we do allow them to put in is to sort of exclusivity within an industry. So some of our LPs have kind of a do not invest list. If there's 4 or 5 top competitors, we won't go to them to invest in our fund, which is fine. We've got different industries representatives. So if we get an anchor in an industry, we're happy to move on to another one for sure. And then to John's point, as soon as you start putting this stuff in, it can really weigh down on the startups themselves if you start to put onerous terms on them. And we all want them to thrive and grow and be creative and be able to go get after it. So we try to avoid those.
And I guess, George, the other day you would actually raise the issue of the recent August SEC rules around prohibiting preferential treatment by size of investment.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, especially for funds that are actively fundraising and have side letters in place and have already put some of these terms in place. We've stopped our fund-to-fund investments for now. We're not actively making them. We'll revisit it when we do fund 2. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting time for GPs.
Okay. We have a number of interesting questions that have come in through the Q&A. That one around removing financial considerations. How do you justify strategically making a second investment in a fund or in a second fund? You already have the relationship with the GP, so it seems only incrementally beneficial. So does anyone want to comment on, do you usually have the same LPs, Katie, from one fund to another, or?
We do. We've been fortunate so far to have a strong corporate LP base. We have had a couple of instances where maybe the innovation budget changed or the head of the ventures program has moved on to go do other things that can cause a blip. But we've had good consistency within our LP base, and we have actually seen folks come back for additional funds if they maybe sat a fund out.
That's the same challenge that we have to answer to the regular like CVC. One of the reputations that CVC struggle is that corporate don't follow up when the strategy changes, and same for like LP investment. Even though the strategy remains, we have to answer to the question, oh, we already have relationship. Why do we invest in second fund? But from GP's perspective, we are doing good. We are having good relationship in order to maintain the LP relationship, and that's something in the middle, standing in the middle that I'm struggling, and we have to sell that we've done this and that interesting thing, we've achieved this and that, so we should be continuing that, or even in the last, like we are doing like third fund of the one of the GP that we invest in, and we have to kind of increase the like collaboration. For example, we are doing like one secondment, but maybe we have a right to 2. Do we actually have a proper resources put in aside? But it's easy for us to persuade internally, and we actually like evolving our relationship, and we have to do that because this is working such a great opportunity. It's like something that we have to, because we don't really plan for the follow-on usually. So that's how we are struggling as well. But going forward, maybe we should plan for the follow-on as well.
George, what about you?
Yeah, this has actually been an area of incredible learning for me. First, I just want to make sure everyone understands Woven Capital is a Delaware limited partnership. It's basically similar to a plain vanilla fund that you would find in Silicon Valley. So it's 10 years with 2 one-year extensions. And in my mind, my thinking was, I don't want to be investing in a fund in year 4 or 5 of our fund, because that fund is new and it's going to outlive us. And so my thinking was, let's get our fund-to-fund investments out of the way as quickly as possible in year 1, if possible, year 2 at the latest. And we did that. Our team really prioritized the fund-to-fund investments. In fact, we've done 9 fund-to-fund investments in 2.5 years and only 5 direct investments. We really got the fund-to-funds out of the way. But what I didn't realize, and I regret that I didn't plan for this, was that some of those funds were going to run through their funds in 2 years or 3 years, and they were going to be raising another fund. And their expectation was that we would come into their next fund. And I wish I had, if I could go back and do it over, I would have allocated funds simply to go into later funds. And I would have done it just like I would have for a regular startup that we're investing in, well, we may invest a certain amount, but we're going to reserve and allocate for future investments. It's not perfectly the same as a direct investment, but still we need to be able to support those funds. And one of the things that we learned the hard way as well is, and this goes back to the topic of side letters, we had the side letter in place that gave us access to their database to this one particular fund, but that access was only as long as they were in that fund. And when they moved to their next fund, we lost those rights. So yeah, we have a relationship with them, but some of the rights that we had negotiated for and some of the benefits that we had actually hoped we would have, we lost them. So I think it's important, just like when you're investing in a startup, you need to be thinking about the long-term relationship and the expectation of the GP, and you need to factor that in at the time you make your first LP investment.
And John, when you set up your earlier funds, did you do so with the set the expectation with your LPs that there would be, an ongoing series of funds that you'd expect them to participate in or hope they would participate in?
Sure. And, at the end of the day, we got to haul the mail. The reason we're dual aim and we want to produce good returns and also drive strategic value is that we want it to be a good investment. When the time comes to re-up for a next fund, we want the LPs to feel like it's a solid investment, and they should do that for even strictly IRR reasons. That said, the other sort of obvious qualitative issue is that these are discrete funds. And when you're not in the active fund, you're not getting access to the current sourcing that's going on. And that's one of the more valuable aspects of being involved with a GP team, is to see what the current state of play is and what the current state of the innovation landscape is and what the current sourcing events are that are going on. And you're not, for confidentiality and other reasons, you're not going to have access to that if you're in the prior vintages and not in the current vintage. So, but again, at the end of the day, you got to haul the mail and be perceived as adding value and being useful to be involved with. And we've been fortunate in that respect.
And one thing along those lines that I didn't think of at the time we were making our fund of fund investments, but it's clear to me now, is that because we invested in 9 funds across multiple geographies and multiple industry sectors, we actually have very, very good diversification in our portfolio, which means, our returns aren't likely to be huge, but we're not likely to lose money either. I like to think across the portfolio, we're going to make good financial returns. And that's all the more reason that, as John said, they're discrete entities, they're discrete funds. Sometimes the investment thesis or the partners may change from fund to fund. And so I think just maintaining that point of view of diversification and continuing to accelerate is valuable.
And from both the GP and the LP side, what issues do you see as representing kind of the greatest pitfalls or challenges in establishing relationships? Maybe we'll start with Katie from a GP perspective.
Yeah. No, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but the startups have limited resources. They're hustling, they're trying to build their companies, and working with big corporates can really kind of suck the life out of them, either through pilots or constantly be doing meetings but not getting anywhere. And so it's that resource drain on the companies themselves is one pitfall for sure. And then from our perspective, not being able to get in front of either the right business unit or the right buyer or get to the right person. So it's again that like navigating the corporate matrix to make sure we can get the right folks in the room.
And so are you looking for corporates that can bring kind of the CVBD or the portfolio development capability that they might use for direct investments and apply it to your relationship as well?
Yeah, that, and we've got, I think, 25 investments. 20 of them have direct customer relationships with our LPs. And so who is the buyer? Who's going to be the buyer of this technology? That for us is the most important.
So from that,
you, Prisha, about that. We are in a large organization, and this is one small division that making commitment to the collaboration. We do. I mean, actually commit to the collaboration, but we had to like upfront say that please don't expect like all of our corporate can be collaborative of you. Actually, we get inbound, but sometimes we don't get the response from like a division. We don't closely work together even internally because it's a big organization. It can happen. So that's something we are still struggling with. But making that clear upfront is something we have been doing, and that hope that won't damage that relationship.
So George and John, what do you have from the portfolio development or portfolio success or CVBD, whatever you want to call it, perspective to support the fund investment portfolios?
Yeah, so we have what we call a portfolio success team. It's one person right now, but we're going to hire people. We're going to have somebody start in London soon, and we're going to hire someone in Plano, Texas, where Toyota Motor North America's headquarters are. And we're going to hire somebody down in Nagoya, which is where Toyota Motor Corporation's Japan headquarters are. We want to be as close to the business as possible, and rather I should say businesses or regional businesses, so that when those opportunities come in, we can immediately go to the proper people at the business and move those conversations forward. We're a growth stage fund, so we're not even looking at early stage companies, primarily because they typically don't have the opportunity to really work with Toyota at this stage in their development. We have basically three criteria. The companies that we invest in have to be able to accelerate a business, expand a business, or drive operational efficiencies for a business. And that could mean cost savings or any number of things. And with that in mind, we're really looking for companies that are mature enough, stable enough, and staffed well enough to actually work with Toyota.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the two questions are related, and your original question is sort of the core one about what's the hardest part and what's the most important thing that you have to do well to make the program persist. And I think of it as like the two arrows pointing in opposite directions. If we're not extracting the right value, but much more importantly, if the LPs are not extracting at least that much value out of the relationship, you're not gonna sustain and persist. And so you're constantly trying to think of ways to optimize around that. Just an example at a very tactical level, in our world, the life of a payer is very complex. And so early or growth stage businesses walk in all the time to payers and say, I'm going to save you money in Medicare. I'm going to save you money in Medicaid. And they don't understand the complexity of that statement to a CFO or to a network leader or to an InfoSec person. There's 12 different people in that room, all of whom have very specific, complex requirements to accomplish that. And so if we can help the portfolio companies with sort of contract readiness, understanding the language they're speaking to the people in the different business units, such that they're being efficient with those people's time and getting to the crux of what those people are going to need to know. Those are examples of the kinds of things that can be useful.
Right. So all of this actually sounds very much like an extension of what a direct investing program might look like. So the expectations for the corporate involvement are much higher, I think, than perhaps they were in the past. We have a couple of questions in here about LP size or the fund. One person asked, what's the typical check size allocated to a fund of fund? And someone else asked about, is it better to do a lot of smaller investments or one larger investment? So what are your perspectives on what level of participation is needed or is optimal for being able to deliver the value? So Katie, what do you guys typically for a corporate LP?
Yeah, so we have a range from $5 million on the low end up to $15 million on the high end. If you're a $15 million investor, then you'll get to sit on our LP advisory council. And if you're a $5 million investor, then we'll kind of come up with a more curated program, again, meeting you where you're at. Is it monthly calls? Is it quarterly calls? What kind of engagement do you want?
As long as you don't put it in a side letter, I guess, according to the SEC.
We honestly, we haven't had to yet because we are so engaged and we consider it such an important part of our investment process. It hasn't been an issue for us.
Right. Yeah. So George and Chihiro, do you have a perspective on kind of what an appropriate range would be for fund allocations?
Yeah, for us, we, I allocated 10% of our total fund, 80 million, for fund of funds. And I knew that we wanted to do at least 10 or more fund of fund investments. So, roughly, let's call it 5 to 8 million per investment. And that's basically been where we're at in terms of averages. I will say there is one fund where, and this also is a function of what Katie was just saying, depending on the check size, you got different rights. Right. And because these were new fund investments for us, we always came in at the lowest tier that we could get in. But there was one fund that we invested in where Toyota Ventures, our sister fund, that's an early stage fund, also put in a small amount so that together we could share the benefits of the higher level. Even though we were separate entities ourselves, we were viewed as Toyota, and so we were able to garner more favorable treatment.
Right. But John, Chihiro, do you have any thoughts based on your experience on kind of?
Our investment in funds come from balance sheet, and we don't have dedicated total size of fund investment. So it's a matter of what do we want to get out of from the relationship. For the fund that we are so limited partner, we like 75 million is the larger side for us, and the other one is related to what is required to get the benefit that we want is relative to other LP in the fund dictate. Right. Some are very explicit. Let's say, like, in order for you to sit in like LPAC, you need this size of commitment. Right. Or having a secondment there requires this amount of commitment is something very explicit. Other one is more like kind of like negotiation and dialogue basis as well. But also we have to balance it up internally as well, as we have like multiple funds internally. If we are putting this size in this fund, and then if we are to increase or if we are to invest more in this fund, it has to be like more right or more involvement. So those balance is beyond something we can negotiate between LP and JP, but it's also have to be balanced out internally as well.
Right. Okay, well, we are coming to the close. So I wanted to quickly get each of you to give me your quick answer on what's your one piece of advice for CVCs who are looking to integrate fund investments into their investment portfolios. What would be the one thing that you think that they really should be thinking about? So Katie, you want to think?
Yeah. I'll go. Yeah, I would just say, all of our corporate LPs have different objectives, different priorities, different things that they want to get out of the relationship. So think really clearly about what does it mean for you? What do you want to get out of this? And then just be really clear and open up front and make sure that you find the right partner who can, again, meet you where you're at and provide the right insight or strategic value or whatever it is that you're looking for from that fund relationship. Just be super clear about it.
Okay. John, what's your one?
Yeah, I would echo that. Understand what success means to you, and then diligence the GPs, in depth. Understand who you're talking to and which ones fit and are most likely to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Chihiro?
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree. Communication, set the expectation. That's about it.
Yeah. Okay, George, you have a final word?
It's something I mentioned earlier, but it aligns with the other comments that we just had. And that is, I would have hired somebody on our team who is dedicated to managing our LP investments. It actually takes time to follow up with these funds and get the full value out of them. And if my investment team is doing that, they're not talking to startups. So if it's a lead coming in, that's great. But I think managing the relationship is also important. And it's something that you should think about. It obviously depends on the number of fund investments that you have. We have 9. And so it doesn't get to a point where it's good to have somebody who can look at that. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's like with a portfolio development function, we say is once you get to 7, then that's critical mass. You need to have someone to manage it. So, well, I want to thank our panelists for candidly sharing their wisdom and their learnings. And this is really, indicative of the power of the community. So thank you again so much. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes updating people on some other things that are happening within GCV. We have a our webinar next month is going to be produced in collaboration with Be Tomorrow Ventures, and it's going to explore opportunities for investing in functional foods. And things may taste good or be low in sugar, but what else can they do? Can they give energy? Can they improve concentration? Can they strengthen the immune system? So we're going to hear from Lukasz Garbowski of Be Tomorrow Ventures, which is a leading investor in the space, and I as well as some very unique startups. And I've personally trialed a number of BTV's portfolio company offerings, and I'm a particular fan of Blockhead's energy supplement gum. It's great for jet lag. And I walked through some of our keystone data at the beginning of the session, and we are in the process of refreshing our annual data set. And so we'd like to invite all of you to participate. The survey is completely anonymous, and anyone who participates will receive an aggregate summary of the data. And as you saw in some of the slides we showed earlier, we can make the data even more relevant for your program and look at filtering it by maturity phase, by operating model, by fund size, by geo, by any number of characteristics. So we really hope that you will participate and anonymously contribute your program's perspectives. You know, the richer the data we have, the better the insights that we can provide back to you. And we do have lots of community gatherings coming up over the next few months. In September, while the weather is still warm, we will be convening the CVC community in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In October, we will offer senior NDA opportunities at our Executive Leadership Forum in New York, as well as an opportunity to experience the vibrant and emerging CVC scene in Brazil. And in November, we will be back in Asia with the GCV Asia Congress and leading a delegation to Japan and Korea. And we'll also be connecting with the CVC community in Germany in November. And registration is already open for our flagship summit in Monterey with an all-star lineup already confirmed. And we would like to call special attention to a few upcoming institute courses. We still have space in our September investment programs course, as well as our LATAM flavored November course. We'll have a course in Tokyo in person with the event. And in December, we're actually going to pilot a special all-female edition of the course for women in CVC. So all of the speakers and all of the guest experts and all the participants will be women. And we are accepting nominations for our Landing the Value of Corporate Venturing course, which does include a mentored project as part of the course. And one pod has actually picked this LP Value Capture Challenge as their project. So that should be very interesting. And finally, do visit the website for any of the latest corporate venturing news, analysis, and reports. And do check out our new podcast series, CVC Unplugged. There's a fascinating conversation with Michelle Gonzalez, head of Microsoft's M12 Ventures. That's very illuminating. Finally, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments about the Institute or about our CVC benchmarking survey and platform. And the replay of this webinar and all previous webinars, as well as summary editorial insights, are available on the GCV website. And anyone who's registered for the webinar will be sending out the links over the next few days. So thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you back next month. And thank you, panelists. You've been fabulous.